Hey, Simon.
Jim, what is going on? How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Just got back from a week in Georgia, St.
Oh,
Simons Island, off an
oh,
island, and enjoyed
oh,
Experimentation Island.
you were there. How
I
was
was
it?
there. It was amazing. It was more than I expected it to be. It exceeded my expectations in a great
Okay.
way. A lot of good people, very kind of small, intimate. You got to talk with everyone there basically.
Yeah,
It's just a lot of good, smart people. It was great.
that sounds fantastic. I went to Georgia a little while back to speak at an event, and it was held at the where they filmed the Avengers. So I was on like a sound stage, and they're like, "This is the Avengers campus," and it was pretty awesome. And immediately, of course, I go on Zillow, and I'm like, "Well, I need to move here." So the house price was right, but my wife's attitude wanting to move to Georgia was not. So
Yeah,
no
no.
worries. No worries. But speaking of GA, I think we're talking about Georgia today, right? Or
Yay,
GA?
George.
Something like that.
I did not even plan that. That just like
Oh,
magically happened. Um,
magic.
but before we get into that, Simon,
Yes.
today's number is 975.
Okay. Why?
Any guesses as to the significance of that number?
Uh, no.
It's connected to our
The
top.
number of impressions given out to the total of ads on OpenAI in the first 2 weeks because they're not serving any ads.
That could be it.
Yeah.
The number I was thinking of, though, was the number of days that have passed since Universal Analytics was officially sunset.
Oh, rest in peace.
Asterisk, the free version.
Right.
Of course, if you
Right.
were GA360, you got an extra year, but I'm going with the free version sunset
Sure.
as the official date. So
Absolutely.
it's been more than 3 years.
Oh man, I remember
Long
it well.
time.
It was a sad day.
It was it though?
I mean, to a degree, it was. I think when GA4 came out, it was pretty half baked, right? I think that was one of those early moments where we were sort of looking around, going like, "These things aren't even like these metrics or dimensions aren't even available in the API. Is this actually functional?" But maybe that's what we're going to talk about more today.
I think we are.
All right.
Yeah, we are going to talk about, Google Analytics, Universal Analytics sunsetting, new versions, other analytics out there. As a lot of people started to wrestle with the idea of like migrating to GA4, the idea
Yeah.
of like, well, what else? Is there something else maybe I should switch to if I'm going to re-implement analytics track on my site? And so we're going to talk about what are the different analytics platforms out there. There are a lot of options to choose from, and we are lucky because we have the world expert on analytics platforms, web analytics platforms. And web is too narrow because product analytics platforms do fit in there. Jason Packer is with us. Jason is the analytics architect and owner of Quantable Analytics. He's also the author of Google Analytics Alternatives, a guide to navigating the world of options beyond Google, second edition, just released. You can see it right here.
There it
Got
is.
the physical copy because I'm old and I like pages.
And we'll throw the link to that in the show notes so folks
Link.
can go out there and buy it at the local book retailer.
Yes, link in the show notes. You can also get the digital version. I have both because why not?
Yeah. You're just
he's-
that nerdy. You need it at all times. You're like, oh, I'm on an island somewhere, but I need to read this book.
Yeah, right.
It's good.
Jason, he's not just an analytics nerd like us. He has a creative side to him, like a lot of our guests. He's an accomplished musician. He's collaborated with Josh Silverbauer, friend of the pod, on User Journey, the rock opera. He's also recently presented at Super Week. He's spoken at several Measure Camp on conferences and is an organizer for the Columbus Data and Analytics Wednesday meetup. In fact, he's going to be speaking there at that exact meetup in 1 week from today. Today being the day that the episode is released, not the day that we're recording. Either way, about a week from now, unless you're listening to this episode much longer after it was released, in which case you already missed it. You missed your chance to see Jason in person talking about Google Analytics Alternatives. So,
on what date? You didn't actually say the date. What is the actual date he's speaking in?
Wednesday, March 11th, 2026.
Okay.
Is the date. So if you're listening to this before then, this is your chance to go see Jason in person.
Well, right. I build it as, come and see me give my actual opinion, the pure, unfiltered. Want to know what I really think about GA4? You can finally come and see it in person since it's not live streamed.
Okay. Right. Well, hopefully we'll get a little prelude to that today, and we'll be able to tap into some of that opinion. But yeah, Jim, where should we start?
there's so many places to dig into this. And I thought an interesting way to kind of frame it would be like looking at, Google Analytics as the thread through the history, the past, the present, the future of web analytics, and how it's kind of transformed from early days of web logs to, to today, where we're talking about like, oh, let me just spin up my own analytics platform with Cloud Code. There's a lot going on, a lot of alternatives. People are used to GA, Google Analytics being the default, but there's a lot out there. So with that, actually, normally I give like a really long historical overview of our guest, and I feel like I did Jason a little bit of a disservice. Maybe Jason, if you could
I don't
tell us,
mind.
maybe give us a little bit of the history, because you've been around since the very beginning, right? You were
Yeah,
even pre-analytics. You were developer
sure. Yeah. Yeah, I
coding
did.
in punch cards and
Yeah,
Cobalt or something like that.
probably. Yeah, I think that, I did my first internet startup 30 years ago this year. Um, and I was making websites even before that. So, I was definitely out there on the
What was your
internet.
first
And
internet startup?
it was a company called Reservations Online that we did, sort of predates Open Table. It was in
Okay.
Chicago in the mid 90s. And yeah, we did like internet restaurant reservations, but the whole thing where people didn't really have internet yet was kind of a
Yeah.
problem for,
Or
uh,
phones.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it was a little bit early, but it was a good experience. I was in college and actually wrote up a few years ago, wrote up a whole blog post about it on my site. So if for some reason you want to really dig deep into like, 1995, 96 internet technology, you can read my blog post with my two collaborators on that. So yeah, it's been around for a long time, since the early days of the internet. Then of course the early days of analytics, running log analyzers, back not late 90s, ran Urchin in I think 2001. So, at a different internet startup. So I definitely remember the early days, and then remember when Urchin switched from being a log analyzer to being, an on-page JavaScript tag to being, Google Analytics. And now 21 years later after that, we've got hundreds and hundreds of different options out there. I mean, there was a few options back in the day as well, but it really is it's a very different uh, ecosystem now, and it can be really hard to sort of get your arms around what's happening. Like, like that's sort of part of the whole idea of the book, is like, don't look at GA as the default, right? For so long, we've looked at GA as like, oh, I set up a website and I throw Google Analytics on there. You hear people say like, oh, put analytics on there. They don't even say Google. It's like implied. It's synonymous with web analytics.
It's the Kleenex of analytics.
Yeah, I'm sure there's yeah, there's something to delve into there, but yeah.
It
So
collects all of the snot and boogers
oh,
of the internet. I don't know. Yeah.
I
Strike
set you
that.
up for that, and but yeah. So it's it's such a different ecosystem now. There's hundreds and hundreds of different options. There's server side. There's ad blockers. There's multiple different ways that we can be tracking. There's still, of course, some people using log analyzers. Some people using variations on the early days of IP, identifying users by IP. Um, Things like that. So I think, part of the book is like the first half is sort of a framework to help you understand all the different tools that are out there. So like if you read just the first half, I would be totally happy. The first half does not contain any reviews of any analytics tools. It just contains sort of like background about, oh, here's how to think about consent. Here's how to think about bot detection. Here's how, what server side kind of means, or at least means to me. Um, and so that's sort of, it's not just product reviews. It's a way to think about all these different tools and how to like, think about what's the right fit for you. But yeah, it's certainly changed a heck of a lot from those early days. Sometimes I think it's maybe not as much fun anymore, but sometimes you try to like bring some fun back to it, right? Like, you know,
Well,
Yeah.
and just as we're thinking about the nature of the space, it is one thing I've been thinking about a lot in recent times, and that is, what is the point of digital analytics? Like, what is the point of a digital analytics platform? Like, what is it designed to do? And I say that a little tongue in cheek, acknowledging that I think over time, perhaps platforms became bastardized to essentially just become attribution platforms, and we maybe stopped caring a little bit about behavioral signals and so forth. But in your view, as you're thinking about sort of obviously GA4 and GA4 alternatives, but what are you actually looking at here as the point of these platforms?
I think that's a great question, and partially because it gets at, the different types of tools that are out there, right? Like you talk about like, oh, is it web analytics? Is it digital analytics? Is it, uh, product analytics? Is it mobile analytics? And like figuring out what you want out of the platform is a big first step in order to actually put you in the right direction. And that's where like historically GA has sort of done everything, right? It's like tried to do a little bit of the product type stuff, especially with GA4, a lot of the marketing attribution, marketing analytics stuff. Of course, with GA4 also it became able to do both mobile and web in the same platform. That was sort of the origin of it. Um, so it's uh it's for like, it's up to you what it's for, right? Like it's not, if you install GA or some other platform on your site, like, you should have some reason that you want to do that. Like again, it's that default thing. Like people throw it on there because that's what you do. You put analytics on a website when you publish it. But if you're not like, maybe you're only doing that to get like usage, like you want to know like, oh, um, you know, just to know, hey, I'm running a blog and I want to know this article had 1,000 readers. This article had only 10 readers. I should do more of the things that attracted a lot of people, or you know that some very old school kind of things. Or maybe you're like, hey, I've got a SaaS company and I want to track somebody all the way, track users all the way through from attribution to product usage, to know like, hey, you know users that sign up through this new campaign, they ended up using this part of the product and they didn't like this part of the product. So it, stitching together that whole journey. And that's a whole different thing than like, you know just knowing, oh, I got 1,000 clicks from Google, 1,000 clicks from ChatGPT or whatever. um yeah, so it's like knowing what you want to get out of it is a pretty important first step.
Mm.
And would you say does it seem like the analytics space is fragment at a time where it's fragmenting? Like I always view things in like cycles. Like there's fragmentation and then there's consolidation, and that tends to like always go back and forth over time for a lot of things. And so now like it seemed like like Google Analytics was sort of a consolidation. Like we're gonna like everyone's gonna use Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics. It seemed like there was like those were the two, right? And now it seems like there's like more fragmentation. You have your PWIX, you have your amplitudes, you have post hogs, you have all of these like niche use case analytics platforms where, are you seeing that in practice where there's more people going towards specific platforms for their needs, or am I just imagining that?
No, I think that kind of both things are happening. That there's fragmentation in that, like, even though GA's numbers, usage numbers, like measured by how many people have it on their websites, it's gone down a little, not like a lot, but it's gone down a little bit.
When we say a little, like just to put it in relative terms,
Yeah.
was GA sort of, because I guess in my worldview, I was always like, yeah, it's like 85% everyone's using GA, and maybe 15% if you can afford Adobe, you're going to use that. But
Yeah.
that was the split, I guess, back 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's really hard to measure, and it's gotten much harder. Historically, yeah, I think that 80% of the, if you look at the sites like Built With or W3 Techs or whatever that sort of spider the internet and look what you're running,
Yeah.
those have always said, oh, those are running on 80%. Now, it gets complicated, right? Because if you look at Built With or something, they're looking at a lot of sites that aren't even running analytics tools. Like if you look
Right.
at like the top million sites, a lot of those aren't sites at all. They're CDNs. They're
Yo.
mail only domains. So like, um, I think that 80% market share is a pretty reasonable number. If you look at just like counting the number of installs from a third party service like Built With, which is what I use in the book, that GA has gone down some amount. I mean, it depends a lot on the time comparison window. But let's say that it's gone down like 5% or something like that.
Okay.
And that's because of the volume of GA. That's a huge number of installs, right? Like, that's like if it's on like whatever 40 million websites or something like that. If you say it's on 40 million websites and you lost 5% of that, that's a lot of individual websites. That's a lot of potential customers for some of these alternatives. And I think that's what's happened to some degree. There's a lot of things happening. Getting back, Jim, to your question, is that like there's fragmentation in that, like, hey, some sites, like somebody spins up a new Shopify site. They may not put GA on it at all. They may just use the built-in Shopify analytics, and they may say, hey, this is giving me what I need. That's enough. Or you may get, somebody that's running a SaaS product and they drop GA on there to get their Google Ads info, but then they also primarily are using Amplitude or something like that. So
Mm.
there is fragmentation. I think there is also consolidation in terms of like some of these platforms, like I mentioned Amplitude, or Jim, you mentioned PostHog, that are adding more and more features, right? You might have said like, hey, 5 years ago, you would have said, well, Amplitude is primarily a product analytics tool. Now they're adding a lot of, over the past couple of years, they've added a lot of more tools that are more in the old GA, like the marketing analytics vein.
Right.
So you've gotten to the point where, hey, if I want to run just one platform on my site, other than the Google Ads info, which you can't get from anywhere else with the same amount of detail, you could run, just Amplitude, or you could run just PostHog or something like that.
That is a particularly interesting note. And one question that I've often thought about recently is GA4 essentially just an add-on to Google Ads, in that if you're running Google Ads, functionally you need GA4 because of the event data that's coming through, the conversion data. Like obviously you can have the pixel, but Google even recommends on their own site, yes, we want to be deriving information from GA4 in Google Ads. Is
Yeah,
that I guess the core reason to be using it these days?
Well, I wouldn't go quite that far, but I think that you're onto something there. That's sort of how Google views it. Google views it as it's, I mentioned this in the book, right? That if you go and look at Google's, like, their public company, you can go read all their investor press releases and stuff like that. And if you go in there and look for the line item that says how much money they make from Google Analytics, it's not there, of course, right? And in fact, you won't see Google Analytics mentioned at all. You will see the Google Marketing Platform mentioned very marginally, and you'll see it mentioned as part of the Google Ads ecosystem.
Yeah.
So they, I'm sure, the people that work on Google Analytics themselves don't see it that way, right? They're working on improving the product, and they've actually they've added quite a few things to make it better in the past, couple of years. So that's great to see. And obviously it's great that they're doing that. But like, if you look at from sort of a whole company perspective, Google is an advertising company, and the main purpose of Google Analytics from Google as a business's perspective is to improve the Google Ads platform. So I think that that's certainly a big part of it.
Yeah, I feel like from like 2005 to 2000, I don't know, just throw a number out there, 2017, 2018, like everyone was sort of like forgetting the fact that the only reason Google Analytics exists and is free is because it's meant to drive people to advertise more in Google Ads, right? The whole point of that was like, we need to show people how amazing Google advertising is. And the way that we do that is by giving them this analytics product for free so they can see all the people coming to their site from their Google Ads and purchasing, and then they'll spend more on ads. Like that was the whole point of them buying Urchin. And it feels like for the first 15 years of Google Analytics, like we kind of forgot that. And we just there was this great product and it was a great team and they were very responsive. And then it started to realize, like, as they did the whole like GMP reorganization and like Google Analytics fell under the what was it, the Google Ads or the Google Markets umbrella, and it became very apparent. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. This was an ads product basically.
But was it always that way? Like, because when I think about it, I go, yeah, like I know the story of like what was it, Larry Page flying a plane down to Laguna Beach to buy urchin. And he's like, I'm gonna give it away for free, and everyone thought it was crazy. Yes, there was this intention there of, we're going to use this for our product, but it did seem for at least a good amount of time that the product direction, I won't say was fully agnostic to the ad product, but it was independent. And it was at least thought of as this is enabling brands to actually maybe care more about website traffic and these things. And yes, there is a proxy relationship with Google Ads there, but there isn't inherently a direct platform is designed to feed Google Ads, which I think was the platform pivot that was perhaps made. So can I call you JPAC? I feel like that would be a good nickname.
I mean, that was my, talk about like the 90s. That was my username back then. So, call me whatever you want, Simon. It's
JPAC. There you go. Yeah. So JPAC, what are your thoughts there?
I don't have any inside information from Google. I don't really know exactly, and it's sort of like, I would say that like Google has done a lot of things, especially, in the earlier days to try to like just get more people on the internet, right? Like a lot of their projects were like, not necessarily to try to improve their ads or improve their bottom line, but to like, make like a lot of their work, like to, make SSL more broadly used, to improve site, performance. A lot of that stuff I feel like has, been to improve the internet, like to improve the experience of the internet. And I think that like, maybe especially in the early days, that Google Analytics was part of that. Like, let's allow people to like, understand more about what's going on their website and, make their sites better, because the more people, sort of more broadly, the more people that are online and, having a good experience online, that's good for Google. And, there was the whole "don't be evil" phase. But now people are generally online. I don't think you need to like help to convince people to be online in that same way. It's hard to know. Like there's such a big company, and they make so much money on ads that they could afford to do a lot of things for free. Like why does not everything has to have a really obvious. Like, why does Microsoft offer Microsoft Clarity for free, unlimited? I have no idea. Like, is it to train their AIs? Is there some nefarious reason? Maybe not. Maybe it's just, hey, they're Microsoft or Google, like running one of these platforms is not a huge, it doesn't really like affect their bottom line.
I mean, I think in that particular one, I think Microsoft is playing from behind, and they're trying to find all kinds of ways that they can get hooks into organizations. And without that, they don't really, like, a lot of brands aren't even advertising on Bing. Like, they don't even have the UET pixel in there. So Clarity was at least a way that they could get in that Google didn't have a direct competitor.
Could be. Yeah.
That was. But when we talk about GA4, when we talk about alternatives, one of the reasons why I hear folks really upset with GA4, and look, a lot of these folks are the ones who do remember we'll call it the glory days of GA3. And by the way, that timeline, Jim, that you were sharing, ending right around there, 2017, 2018. 2018 was when Don't Be Evil went away. So it is an interesting correlation. Late? Yeah, May 2018 was when it was removed. I just looked it up while we were chatting. But the reason why from folks that I would talk to, and I'd be like, oh, we don't like GA4 for different reasons. The reason that you're saying is that the UI experience is terrible now, that you can't find the reports that you want, that you're confused by the scoping of metrics that are now available in there. The inconsistency of the data when you pull it back day to day is seeming to change, and therefore it's very hard to rely on this as in a trustworthy capacity. The reason why I was frustrated with it was the API didn't have all the fields and everything. Why do you think people, and are they moving up? Like, what? I guess there's a reason why you wrote a book about GA4 alternatives, right? There's a demand here. Why are people moving away?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. Like, and I think that it kind of ties a little bit into that conversation we were having about price, right? Is that there are a lot of choices in GA that Google has made that are frustrating, not the UI, but like, how long it takes for them to process data, how some of the attribution works, how like, the limits on BigQuery. There are things like that they've done, like, the default 2 months, raw event data storage to like help Google because it's a free product, right? Like, because it's a free product, like, oh, there's going to be, sampling, and there's going to be the hyperlog plus plus stuff happening. So like, if people were accustomed to paying for analytics, like if you look at the paid enterprise level analytics tools that are comparable to GA, they don't do those things, right? Like they
Yeah.
don't, like if you look at like, Adobe or Piano or something like that, they're not like, they might be doing, the cardinality estimation stuff, the hyperlog log stuff, but they're not automatically doing it. They're giving you the option to turn it off or on. And like part of that is that people pay good money for those tools, and so they're different expectations. And even though obviously you can pay for GA, it's a lot of the product is driven by the free side of it. So that's sort of where we're at. Like, they made over 20 years, they really convinced people that analytics should be free. And look, Universal Analytics was, in my opinion, a really good product. It sort of got a little stale there at the end, maybe, but for a long time, it was a really, really good product. And they're giving away a heck of a lot of things for free. And, if you're thinking this is the standard, what I expect to see something for free, then it's really hard to compete with that. But also, like, it makes sense that they're, sort of like some of the things that they've, reined back in, the unlimited data retention, the sampling, things like that. It makes sense in a free product. But getting back, Simon, to your question about like why people are leaving, the people that I see that are leaving, probably the number one reason is privacy and compliance. That probably wouldn't be my first reason to want to leave, but that's of the small sort of anecdotally, that's what I've seen, is that especially in Europe, of course.
I was going to say, is that primarily a European trend here, or just because there was a moment in time where the zeitgeist was very much saying, even in the US, we were just like, privacy is the number one thing, and it's not like that we pulled back on that entirely, but there's not as much attention paid to it at this moment in time, it would seem.
Certainly in the US, I think that's true. I mean, I have seen some, US clients of mine switch away for privacy and compliance reasons, people that are particularly sensitive to that. I think even though like
healthcare and so forth, maybe.
Yeah. Even though like it's fallen off the radar a little bit, it isn't, as big as it was. That still isn't going away. Like, and if I talked about the numbers being pretty consistent, like if you look at like, say, France, for example, if you segment and say just, look at France, then you'll see the numbers in GA really drop off a lot more than in like the US or in globally. It's hard to segment those numbers down country by country. But like that is much clearer. And like I get it, like, because even if you're like, hey, it's okay now, like, we had Shrems too, and it was not okay. And then, we had the new agreement and it was okay again, maybe. But like, who wants to go back and forth with that for something that's not even that great a product, right? Like, it'd be one thing if it was like really spectacularly good and you need it. Like if it was like, hey, like you're seeing that with AI, right? Like if someone had said like, hey, Europeans, you can't use any of the American frontier models, like people are going to push back against that a lot harder than if it's like, hey, Europeans, you can't use, GA4. Like, oh, thank God.
I don't know if my boss why we can't use it. It's just like, well, we just can't use it.
Jim, do you have Santa Claus arriving in your living room by any chance? I'm hearing bells. Jingle bells.
Yeah, that was my dog Kylo.
Okay.
With the jingly collar.
I thought we were gonna do a new feature on the pod, like Jim's Christmas minute. Like, what present would you give to someone who's sick of GA4? Actually, yeah, right. What are the we talked about a couple of them, but in this scenario, so people move for privacy reasons, people maybe would move away for technical reasons. What do you see are the top 2 or 3 alternatives to GA4 at this moment in time?
Yeah, that's certainly a question that everybody asks me, right? Like they usually ask me what's my favorite or what's the best. I'm like, there's, I got to come back obviously with there's no one best. It's dependent upon what your particular use cases are. And I will definitely reiterate that here that, when it comes to the 15 tools that I evaluate in the book, these are all tools that have legitimate, very tenable use cases, right? So there's, could be a very good reason to use every single one of those. for me, I think the ones that I would typically highlight is in the we'll start with the simplified. So in the book, I split it up into 3 different categories: simplified, uh, simplified web, comprehensive web, and then product.
And so what's the difference between the first
Yeah,
two?
yeah. So that the simplified is the tools like the dead simple ones that like a lot of them don't use cookies. They don't necessarily. They claim they don't require consent. They've got these one-page dashboards. These are the tools like Fathom, Plausible. Umami is one that's grown a lot in popularity recently. So there's those class of tools. The most widely used in that category is actually Cloudflare's web analytics tool. I don't generally recommend that one. It's a little too simplified. But most of those tools in that category in the book, they're using IP plus user agent as like sort of identifier rather than cookies. And they're only using that. Like some of the other tools have the ability to use both cookies and some other thing like IP plus user agent. But in that simplified category, it's mostly just that. Plausible is what I use in my own website. Again, well, I didn't say this before, but it's not free. You have to pay $9 a month or something like that. If that's Umami has a free tier. That's part of why I think a lot of their growth and popularity is that for people that want something very simple like Plausible, you can get something similar with Umami and not have to pay. Uh, you know. Anyway, so that's in that category. Those are some of the ones that I would highlight in the product side. And this can get sticky again because like it's not like when I was talking about Amplitude before. Obviously, they have some marketing analytics stuff as well. It's not purely a product analytics tool. The ones that I put in that category, it has a lot to do with the sort of product philosophy and the history of the product, not just, those categories are, highly fungible, right? Like, like I mentioned Amplitude, I mentioned Posthog. Those are probably the 2 that I would mention the most, the 2 that have seen a lot of growth, the 2 that have added a whole lot of features and functionality. They work in different spaces. Like if you're in a larger company, more established, more of those people are using Amplitude. If you're in and you're more interested in more traditional, like if you're an analyst more, like as opposed to Posthog, which is operating more in the developer category, right? Like they really market. It's interesting. Like in our field of analytics, not that's the one that I talk about that people haven't heard of the most. So, I talk about Posthog. Yeah, and they're like, oh, that's a new one to me, especially after the first edition of the book. They've grown a lot since. I think a lot more people have heard about them now. But they have always marketed more towards developers as this is a tool across your whole product, a tool built by developers for developers. Um, you know, I have a bit of a developer background myself. I like that. So they're one that I talk about quite a bit. And then in the comprehensive.
Just while we're on Posthog, they
Yeah.
probably have one of the coolest websites of any analytics platform I've ever seen. In that it is I don't even know how to describe it. It is essentially a desktop Mac
OS,
environment.
yeah,
It's very got all the windows, sort of the older style, but obviously a little bit harder to navigate. But honestly, a novelty in this day and age where every website looks the same.
Yeah, and I talk about that in the book in their review about how that sort of goes along with their philosophy, right? Like if you're somebody looks at that and you think, oh, this is really cool, like I vibe with that, and I like something that changes really fast. Maybe you really like that tool. If you're someone that's like, oh God, this is so this is a pain in the butt to use, and I've been there with using
Sure.
that website. Like if you're trying to actually really find stuff on it, sometimes you're like, this is mimicking a desktop OS, but it obviously doesn't work as well as a desktop OS. And all of a sudden I can't maximize things. I've lost 6 windows in the background, and it's causing my fan to go crazy. So it's sort of the case where the marketing fits the product. But it's very neat. Like it's a quite a it's a fun site, yeah. And they're a fun company. So um, getting onto like and there's some other obviously tools in that category as well, like Mixpanel that a lot of people are familiar with that are solid products as well. Um, and then in the what I call the comprehensive web category, what I call traditional web analytics in the first book for the category, and people did not enjoy that name. So this is, tools that more inherit that like Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics side of things. And in that, obviously people talk about GA all the time. I talk more about Pivot Pro and, I do review Adobe in the book. I didn't review Adobe in the first edition of the book. Adobe is in the second edition of the book. Um, you know, After really getting to use it, I sort of understand where people are coming from a little better with the Adobe stuff. So it certainly has its, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan or anything, but I do see that, like, I do understand why Analytics Workspace is good after using it a bit.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, I think all these are really interesting. I think one of the things Jim said at the top that was interesting too is this idea that, hey, can we all just go and vibe code our own tools? And one of the sections of the book is chapter 17, where you talk about AI in the future. So maybe we can make a bit of a hard pivot into some future casting. What does the future of the web analytics space look like?
Yeah. That's I wish I knew, right? But, I think it is really interesting because, like, if you look at especially that simplified category, like anybody, like any of us right now today could just get in like Cloud Code or whatever and like create something very similar to Plausible or Umami, especially because like these are tools that have their code available, right? Like
Sure.
Umami is fully open source. So you could just be like, hey, Claude, make me a clone of Umami. And like, you could adjust and say, oh, I don't want this, but I do want that. I make some changes, things like that. And like, anybody could do that. But then once you've done that, what do you do? Right? Like, it's still, you've got to maintain it. You got to like consider the performance and the security issues. You got to consider, the reporting. And I think that like when it comes to analytics, so much of doing good analysis is really, looking at, edge cases and looking at like, I'm a big fan of looking at the raw data, right? Like if you look at the raw data, you're going to see some interesting things. It's going to make some gears turn up and, and like say like, oh, this gives me an idea. I want to test this hypothesis. And if you built something that is if you vibe coded some, your own analytics platform, like that's going to be a lot harder because when you see those weird edge cases, when you see that strange data, there's not going to be anybody else out there using that tool. There's not going to be anybody like, you're going to be like, is this interesting weird thing that happened something that is worthy of analysis? Is there just some glitch in my like, one-off vibe coded analytics platform? So I definitely don't recommend that route. There are so many good platforms out there. Like if you're really looking to like save money, like there's some good free tiers out there in some of these tools. If you're really looking to like customize, you could like some of the open source ones are quite customizable. I just don't see the benefit. I mean, it's cool to say you could do that, right? Like be like, hey, I could spin my own up, in a few days and like I could say, hey, I built this thing, but like who cares, right? Like is it helping you get better data? Probably not.
Again, there's no unsolved use cases for the like maybe at the fringes, but like for 99.9% of people, there is an analytics platform that exists that you could use and most likely for free. That is going to do what you need it to do in an analytics sense, right? Like there's no benefit for doing it yourself to be able to like, well, I want to do it this way and I want it to look this way. It's like, okay, yeah, but yeah, like,
yeah,
why?
I don't see. I think there's a degree of modeling of external data that I guess as we're thinking, thinking about these scenarios where there are the God, like the North Beams of the world, where they're essentially modeling impressions that are happening outside these ecosystems where it's not tied to a click. And I started to go, oh, these are different models that they're applying. Like to me, there's something to this where it is tied to the method of ID resolution that is being applied in the first place. And if you've got additional ways that you want to start to resolve that, maybe you want to bring like the TransUnion identity spine, things like this. And then there's the actual ability to think about how that data is modeled to make up for the gap in detection or observation. So I think maybe there's something there. But I know, Jim, there's an area that you did want to dive into in terms of the difference between the two books, because you were such a nerd with both these books that you've line itemed or you've annotated in the columns, the differences between the two. What was it you wanted to dive into? I think you were saying that
I don't know.
that your thoughts have changed since releasing the second edition. That you did say, my current opinion about AI and analytics is this: it's a very valuable tool, but not very good at analysis and dangerous to outsource your thinking to. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, so that there's no AI chapter in the first book. So the first book was written pre-ChatGPT. There's some stuff I think about ML in there or whatever, but like, it's that came out in 2022, it's like several lifetimes ago at this point. So,
Yeah.
but I think so I said that you got the quote I think right on from my chapter about AI, where I sort of lay out like different levels, like say like here's the things that I think AI is really helpful for, like helping you create API code, or helping you like like do
Write a
research,
SQL
or
query.
write a big God, to never have to write a big query SQL again, right? Like so like there's things like that it's really good at, and there's things. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just
Awesome.
touch on that note? Because this is the one thing that I think is particularly interesting about this moment. I think it's unofficial, but there is an MCP available for Google Analytics at this moment in time.
Yeah,
And I think broadly about the future of just self-service analytics and the way that teams want to interact with it. I think there is a very viable path by way of the LLM, and that this conversation around, honestly, it doesn't really matter what platform you use, as long as you're aligned with the collection methodology and the scope of the data there, and it's simple enough to set up the event stream. It doesn't actually matter what platform you're using it. All that matters is it in your MCP? Like, do you have an MCP that you can connect to that data and have a conversation with? Do you think there's validity to that, or do you think we're still going to sort of want to persist in the somewhat static dashboard nature of how most analytics platforms operate today?
Yeah, I'm not like a huge believer. I have used the Google Analytics MCP, and I've looked at the source code for it and stuff, and it uses the same fast MCP server that a lot of other platforms use. So it's really it's a wrapper, right? It's like a wrapper where you like say here's all the API endpoints that so like it's, again, I think it is potentially useful. I think that like, the first time I spun it up and asked it some stuff, it, gave me like wrong answers like a third of the time. It's like, because I tend to ask really complicated questions too. I'm not going to be like, hey, how many
How many visits did I have to my website last week?
Yeah. So, I don't, and I think that like, it's just like, it's another like MCP is like another abstraction layer, right? Like, and when you're talking about LLMs, you just have to be really, when you're talking about LLMs and analysis, you just have to be so careful when it comes to like the randomness, the probabilistic aspect that the LLM introduces. Like, Juliana Jackson and I have talked about this quite a bit, and we're working on a new article now as well about like, thinking about very carefully about what's probabilistic versus non-probabilistic when you build your analytics tool chain, when you build like whatever. So like putting the LLM in charge of making decisions and doing analysis, it depends on what you need by analysis. So I would say the answer to my own like, thing that I wrote 6 months ago about AI is not good at analysis. I still think that that's true, although I think that I've like maybe refined my definition of what analysis means, because obviously it's very good at like, given the right framework like within MCP to say like, here's my API, here's my data schema, like do this, that's going to be pretty reliable, especially if you're able to do good validation on it. And that, but it's still like, like it's very driven by the context that you give it. So like, I'm going to mess up his last name, but Ibrahim Alawi, I saw his talk at Super Week, and he talked about how he gave, created 1,000 different instances of ChatGPT or whatever via API and how to do the same analysis, but he gave different instructions, like to say like, oh, you are an SEO expert, do the analysis of this. You are a PPC expert, do analysis of this, the same thing every time. And, the as you would sort of expect, or maybe you wouldn't expect, but the analysis, they're given a scenario that didn't have a very obvious answer. The answer that the LLM gave was solely or largely dependent upon the context in which you set it up. So if you say, like, you're an SEO expert and you give it this problem set, it's going to say, oh, it's an SEO problem. Now, people might say, well, people do that too. But the difference, there's a big difference is that the LLM does it because it's sort of mirroring back what it expects you to want to hear, right? And the person does it because that's where their expertise lie and that's where they know the most about. So when the SEO person says that it's an SEO problem, they're going to give you more things that I think are more actionable and closer to the real answer than what you get from the LLM. Doesn't mean that the LLM might also still give you the right answer, and it might also be very very helpful, but it's just something that I want people to be careful with, and especially the second part about not outsourcing your thinking to it, because when you start doing that, the more you do it, the more you're just setting up a thinking crutch. And I really do think that people may lose their ability to do good analyses, to do like a good job on their tasks without the when Claude goes down like it did today, like if you're like, oh no, I can't answer this anymore, then maybe check your how much you're relying on it.
Yeah, or even just like how much you learn just by looking through the data, like just doing an exploratory data analysis, and you see this and you dig into that and you go down this rabbit hole and you start to learn. I feel like, Neo in the Matrix, like seeing the numbers falling, and I can say, oh, that's a woman in a red dress. Like you start to look at the data long enough, you start to be able to see, oh, this campaign launched on that data. I see that. Yes. But yeah, if you're just asking ChatGPT or Claude to tell me what happened or what should I be looking at, like you just kind of dissociate from all that's happening.
Yeah. It's like if you give it, if I started from looking at a raw log file, I might immediately see like, oh, I recognize, that user agent, it's a bot. It's got headless Chrome in its user agent, or it's like, it's a 66.IP that I recognize as being, a Googlebot IP or something, even if it doesn't have a Googlebot user agent. So I'm going to be looking at, I've looked at log files for a million years, right? So I might look at that and immediately go on a different route. The analysis might have been like figuring out why our PPC performance is so bad. And the first thing I might notice when looking at the raw data is that there's a bot issue. And, because you wouldn't, like, if it was Claude or something like that, it wouldn't necessarily be starting from that. You wouldn't give it that context. You'd be like, here's
Right.
the data related to the problem that we think it is. And the answer that you're going to get is working within that framework that you've given it.
Exactly. I could keep going on about this forever and hear about all the IP addresses that are bots and look at small files, but we do have to start wrapping up. And as with every show, we ask our guest for an incremental insight. One thing that marketers and analysts listening can do immediately after listening to this show could be a book, a podcast, a video, a tool, anything, Jason, that jumps out at you as being interesting to folks that listen.
What I was going to shout out was reedsy.com, reedsy.com. It's a like sort of like all in one, like if you want to write a book, if you're like, hey, Jason, wrote a book, how hard can it be? Um, Reedsy is a great place to like learn about book writing. To like, they have a marketplace too. It's where I hired the editor for this edition of my book. They've got like some good. They have like a book like layout tool as well. I haven't used that, but I use something else. But um, I just I think writing books is I really enjoy writing books, and there are a huge amount of books being created, but as long as you're like got something interesting to say and it's you saying it and not an AI, then I think go write a book.
Love it.
Simon,
Love it.
what book are you going to write?
God, I don't know. It's all random musings that I have on life and random connections. So maybe I'll give it a go. But who knows? Maybe we'll write the Measure Up book one day.
There we go. Yeah.
But as we've been talking, I've been thinking a lot about just the realities of there are a lot of folks out there who are frustrated with their Google Analytics experience today, and that it's been just sort of the perpetual state of how they operate, and they've just been nose down. And I think there's always a lot of visceral frustration that appears in these organizations, but then you really get into it and you go, you've never really looked at alternatives. So maybe now's a good opportunity to go out and you can get Jason's book and you can hopefully measure up.